Hi everyone, thanks for coming to my talk today. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to stand out as a developer and forge your path, and talk about how you can create some partnerships with publishers like ourselves and other collaborations. I'm not going to go into huge detail as it was originally a short talk, so it's going to be quite concise, focusing on some key areas, and then obviously if you guys have got any questions afterwards, we can dig into that now. So. Just a little bit about myself. Oh, where's the clicker thing? Do I have a clicker?
It's here.
Oh, great. Thank you. Awesome. So a little bit about myself. My name is Leanne. I am the exec producer at Riot Games, heading up our third-party publishing division called Riot Forge. I have three clear passions in life. The first one is games. I've been playing games since I was a tiny person. I also love cats, and these are my two cats, Bailey and Cleo. And I also have a pretty big obsession with cars, so anything cars, Formula One, love, love, love. So a little bit about my career as well, my journey in the video game industry, just because a lot of the stuff I'll be talking about today kind of, collects from those experiences and the things I've worked on during my career. So as mentioned, always loved video games. Since I was really small, one of the first games is Nebulous, and as you can see from the graphics, quite a long time ago. But Streets of Rage is still my favorite game of all time. I think it stands out still against, some of the games today. Definitely the one where I was like, I need to make video games. This is what I need to do with my life, create something that has this type of impact for people. So I went to university and did video games, and then basically got a job as a QA tester and worked my way up through production, working on titles such as Risk, Scrabble, Magic the Gathering, among some many others. And then I got the opportunity to move to Japan for a couple of years, and I worked in their third-party publishing division for a company called Tsutaya, who publish a lot of video games in Japan. So I worked on many different games, including stuff like Monster Hunter. When I got back from Japan, I got the amazing opportunity to work on Need for Speed at EA, which, as mentioned before, I love cars and games, so this was just the perfect opportunity for me. So absolutely loved it. After many Need for Speeds, though, I definitely wanted a new challenge, and got the opportunity to move to LA to work on League of Legends. And that's where I am now, heading up Riot Forge. Still blows my mind that 70 million people play this game every month, and it's quite crazy to have that kind of impact on people's lives. That's why we make games, after all. So a little bit about Riot Forge. We announced a couple of months ago, it's the third-party publishing label within Riot Games, and we are working with multiple developers to build a variety of different League of Legends games. The games that we are making at Riot Forge are very focused on genres outside of the MOBA. So things that aren't competitively driven, things that aren't mass multiplayer experiences. We are very focused on single-player, bespoke, narrative-driven, completable games, so that we can really make sure that we're covering everything for our players and giving something for everybody. We have a handful of games in development. We announced our first two, so we're currently in the trenches on those two games, trying to get those out to players very shortly. So I work with developers on a very regular basis and looking for partners very regularly as well to make these League of Legends games. And so some of those experiences and learnings on how we approach finding partners, I'm going to try and summarize today in this talk. It's stuff that we care about as a publisher. Not all publishers will care about this, of course, because many publishers do have different strategies. But hopefully today, the goal of this talk is to potentially give you guys another way to think about how you could stand out from the crowd when it comes to creating partnerships and having a publisher or an investor be a collaborator within your game. And it's definitely not one size fits all, of course. I don't expect this to apply to all partnerships, but it's definitely things that I've seen that helps a developer and a studio stand out and get the attention that they need. Ultimately, just would love you to go away with some thoughts on how you can stand out for these type of collaborations. So talking about collaborations, there are definitely many different types of collaborations, whether that's a developer to a publisher, or a developer to a developer, or developer to investor. So many different types of ways those collaborations can play out. And, the collaborations could be an investment from a studio or licensing of an IP, work for hire, outsourcing. For Riot Forge specifically, we focus on the League of Legends IP, but it's kind of a mixture because we leverage the experience from the developers that we partner with, and they fully own the games that they make from a creative perspective and from a development perspective. So it's not really traditional work for hire because, we want the games to come directly from the studios. But it's also not licensing IP because we still maintain the ownership of the League of Legends IP. So it's kind of a mixture. But there's many different types of partnerships. And depending on where you want your studio to go and the vision that you have for some of these collaborations, different approaches make sense. But once you've figured out, what partnership you're looking for and what makes sense for your studio, then you can dig out, how do you actually stand out based on what you're looking for. So I believe there's 3 main areas to focus on that can help you stand out when you're looking for a new partnership and to help you differentiate against other studios and set your studio up for success. And this also applies not just to, when you're trying to find a publisher, but also when you're presenting your studio vision or your game pitch to a potential partner. So the first one is around studio identity, then game quality and the products that you've made before and how that represents your studio. And lastly, your unique DNA, which I will go into in a little bit more detail. So firstly, studio identity. So when your studio has a really clear vision, the way that you approach your development and the games that you make, it can help you have a really strong vision within your studio. And in order to achieve a really clear studio identity, think about how you see yourself as your studio. Are you work for hire? Are you outsourcing? Are you a porting company? Do you work on your own IPs or other people's IPs, for example? What's your speciality and why should people work with you? What is your focus of your experience? And a good way to look at that is, kind of through strategy. And that was mentioned in the talk previously as well. It's like having a really strong strategy and understanding what your long-term goals are is really important when it comes to studio identity. And when I think about studio identity, I reflect on this book that I've read called Essentialism. I would definitely recommend it. It's a really great book, especially for people that work in an industry as fast-paced as ours, and we want to do everything all the time. There's a really interesting case study in this book about a marketing ad agency. And the company were really struggling. They were trying to figure out, how do they turn things around? How do they become successful? And the CEO knew that one thing that they did really well was create really high-quality presentations for clients. So they went on an offsite. They spent some time really digging into what their studio identity was and what would make them successful. They looked at their previous partnerships and the ones that they had reoccurring, and they decided to pivot the company. And rather than do a little bit of everything when it comes to ad agencies and marketing, they decided to solely focus on offering bespoke, high-quality presentations. Once they did that, their studio identity was really clear. People knew they go to this ad agency for this particular thing, and they know that they did it really well. So they leaned into that one thing, and they went from a really struggling company to thriving. And they got all the business from clients because it was very clear what they did very well. And I think this can apply to game studios as well. It's obviously you're not going to make the same game every time because games are very, very different. But maybe there's a certain genre that you focus in on or a certain type of experience within your games that, is your real clear identity. And that core identity can appear in everything that you make without having to make the same game every single time. So that's just something to have a think about, if you're looking to set up a studio or if you already have a studio, like what is your core strategy and where do you want to be and what's that thing that you do really, really well? And of course, game quality is extremely important. We all want to make the best games possible, ensuring the games that come out of your studio are the highest possible quality they can be. Obviously, there's constraints there. I'm not saying that every game you have to make is 100 or 95 Metacritic and sells, millions of units. Within your constraints, within the size of your studio, within the talent that you have at your studio, within the budgets and the times that you have, it's important to be able to show that you value quality and that you're trying to hit that quality bar consistently. Especially partnerships, they want to ensure that you're going to make a great game at the end of the day. So being able to show that is really important. And just making sure that you care about and show the potential. If you haven't launched a game before, then maybe it's shown in your prototypes or your game pitch, those kind of things. Sorry. And lastly, the one that I feel is the most important when it comes to standing out from the crowd is something that I like to call unique DNA. And I like using this term because it creates, it's a creative triangle, basically. Design, narrative, and art. Some of the core creative elements that make up the games that we make. And as a studio, it's really powerful to have something unique to you and that can help drive your studio identity. And whether that's, a unique art style, have you created the best pixel art? Have you done unique animation? Studios have a unique art style that stands out, like Gris, for example. Or is it something within your narrative? Are you great at doing VO or character interactions, showing character emotions through your dialogue? Something along those lines when it comes to narrative. Haven's a great example of that. They specifically recorded their VO with both characters in the room at the same time. And so you really get that emotional connection, and that's something that they've, done as a unique piece in their games. And it can also come from design. Is there a certain core mechanic that you've coined, that you have in your games, a certain system that is in every single one of your games that you improve every single time, but it has that core piece. It's your identity, it's something that you've created. And it makes you stand out from the rest, especially if it's in a certain genre space as well. So having something within this DNA helps put a stamp on your studio. It's something that you excel at. And, if a publisher or a partner is looking for a specific thing, like a great art style, and for Forge, art style is something really important to us because we want to reimagine the League of Legends universe into many different art styles and approaches. And so a studio that has something unique in one of these spaces is really, really important. And you can fill that gap if a publisher is looking for something specific, then you're there to fill that gap and they know exactly who to go to for that. And just don't be afraid to lean into that unique thing that you have in your studio. Like I said, it doesn't mean your game has to be the same every time. You take that core mechanic or that core system or that identity, and you can reimagine it, but as long as it's apparent in the products that you make. So just to summarize those 3 key areas that I believe can help you stand out and get the attention from publishers and different types of collaboration, spend some time really thinking about your studio identity and what you should focus on, what's the thing that you do really well, and find a path that will enable you to really amplify that identity that you have. And then game quality, obviously, this shows in your products, but if you haven't made any games yet, then the way that you pitch your games, the presentations that you make, the prototypes that you make, you can show your quality bar and your values within those approaches as well. And then lastly, your DNA, what's your differentiator in the games that you make and how you approach the design, the narrative, and the art of your games. So with all of that in mind, how do you find, a partnership, depending on what you are looking for? Of course, there's many different ways, and obviously this isn't rocket science, but coming to events like this is an awesome way, doing networking, and sometimes the partnerships come from, the most crazy interactions. You just happen to meet someone in the hallway or something like that. So be open to all types of conversation and meeting people, especially when it might only take 15 minutes and it might come up with something really fruitful. For LinkedIn specifically, I think it's a good platform, but one thing I would recommend is being really specific if you're reaching out to publishers, for example. I get a lot of people reaching out to me, and a lot of the times they just say in their email, I've got an idea for a League of Legends game. And I'm like, oh, great. That's awesome, but, be specific. Like, what is the thing that differentiates you against the rest? Why should I get on a call with you and talk through this idea? What is your unique offering? And be really upfront about that, Don't be scared to tell someone on LinkedIn, like, this is our unique offering, this is the benefit that we can provide to you, this is how we stand out, do you want to chat? And I think that's a much better way to approach it than just being kind of really generic and hoping that that person will jump on a call with you. So some benefits of the partnership once you have found someone. I think it's a really great idea, especially for up-and-coming studios, to partner with a publisher or some form of collaboration. It really allows you to focus on the game development and do what you do best. And of course, some of these things don't apply to all partnerships and all publishing collaborations, because it really depends on the level of support and the business terms and all those kind of things. But the key thing is that you want your publisher to take the pressure off of all the other things that come when you want to actually release a game. You can make the best game possible, but if you don't get the awareness and you don't get the reach, then it's not going to get out to players. And so the publisher should be the one that really focuses on amplifying your game, creating bespoke game marketing, trailers, events, and really understanding how to gain awareness and ultimately acquisition from players. And from Riot Forge's perspective, that's what we do. Our whole entire package is helping with everything to do with marketing, distribution, QA, localization, voiceover, all of those things, so that the studio can just fully focus on developing an awesome game. So I believe that developer-publisher partnership should be two-way, and it should benefit both sides. Ultimately, as a publisher, we get the amazing experience and talent from the studio and that unique offering, and the developer gets, the support that's required to really get that game into players' hands in the best possible way. So, that's just a quick-fire summary of some of the ways to help you stand out when it comes to trying to find a partnership, a collaboration, or a publisher. Any questions?
So I'm Guilherme from Nizu. I have a question about the expansion of the League of Legends lore that Riot is now doing.
Yeah.
So Forge is clearly involved with this. I think Riot has also announced a tabletop division.
Yeah.
So I would just like to ask you to talk a bit more about this strategy that you have right now of expanding the lore, and what benefits do you hope to achieve from it?
Yeah, so we've been working on the League of Legends universe from an lore IP perspective for 10 years. Have a lot of information when it comes to all of the champions that we have and the regions in the world. But the MOBA is not really a place that you can, tell stories, and not a place where players can really experience why those champions are there, what's their personality, where have they been, what's their journey, where are they going. And so if we really want to take advantage of this universe that we've built and use the opportunities that we've created, these different mediums are a great way to achieve that. And also we have a lot of fans of League of Legends that don't necessarily want to play a competitive MOBA experience. It's a very specific type of experience, very intense. You need a lot of time investment, especially if you're ranking up through the whole entire year. Some people just want a game experience where they can sit for 4 hours or even 40 hours, but be able to pause the game, have their kid on their lap, eat dinner, those type of things. And we have the opportunity to create those experiences because we have such a fleshed out universe. So we want to take that opportunity and give our players more to experience.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Would anyone else like to ask a question? Any more? Yep.
Hi, thanks. I appreciate, League is obviously PC developed, although I appreciate you're looking for some mobile things with Tencent. And the first two announced titles at Forge look to be console PC focused.
Yeah.
is there a priority in Forge's strategy then on platform of delivery, or are all bets open?
All bets are open, actually. It really depends on a few things. Firstly, the developer we work with and their experience. I don't think it's right to go to a console developer and say, let's make a mobile game, because it's a very different experience. So that's first and foremost. Our developers kind of help to create that strategy, what platform makes sense for the game. And then also, we're not trying to be one platform first. The whole goal of Riot Forge is that we're going after different motivations and different players. So we need to be on those type of platforms. If we want to go after a player that only has 15 minutes in a day to play, then mobile's probably going to be that platform. So we're definitely not any platform first. The portfolio will include every single platform depending on the type of game the developer is making and their experience.
Thank you.
Could you pass the mic down to the chap at the end?
Hi.
Hi.
First of all, that was really interesting. Thank you. I know that we have some people back at our studio who have been putting together ideas and pitches for you guys.
Cool.
But I also suspect that you get hundreds of thousands of these.
Yes.
What's the best way of getting these in a format that's kind of useful for you to process without, reading through a whole bunch of stuff?
I mean, we don't do an official RFP process. We don't do submissions, as it were. A lot of the ways that we approach it is through connections. First, having a chat, seeing if it's a good fit, depending on the games that have been made before and what your experience is. And then if that works, we really leave it up to the developer to decide kind of how they show their ideas. If that's just a VidCon and we talk through it, if it's a one-page summary, if they want to put together a whole entire presentation, that's fine. But really the best way to start out, if you're interested in working with us, is to be honest, contacting us on LinkedIn or through our website, and then setting up some time to meet at GDC or doing a VidCon, and that's normally the way that we go through that. We have quite a robust process of determining if a collaboration is actually going to be successful. So we can normally determine that from the first conversation or from the studio's identity and the games that they've made before, because we're looking for quite specific things. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
I have one or two that I could ask.
Cool.
So you mentioned, alongside the announcement of Riot Forge late last year, you also announced a ton of new IPs and new projects. Mm-hmm. What's the statement that you're making with the sort of sudden and quite almost simultaneous announcement of all of these games as it affects your identity, Riot's identity?
I think the key thing is that, League of Legends has been going for 10 years, and we want to go for even longer. We want to provide players with something that makes sense for them. And especially, 10 years ago, player base has got older and they want different things. And so we have to keep up with that. And if we want to keep those players in our ecosystem, then it's important that we, create different experiences that are applicable to them now in their life, as well as, still bringing on new players from a younger age as well. So I think doing the announce all at the same time was to really celebrate the 10 years of League that we had previously and say, look at all this awesome stuff that's coming for the next 10 years. We're still with you, we're committed, we want League to go on forever, basically. So being able to do that as a package was just much more impactful to celebrate League and also show what's coming in the future from a strategic perspective.
Cool, but there was also the shooter is a new IP, a new universe, isn't it?
Yes, correct.
And it's a competitive sort of team-focused shooter. There's comparisons to Overwatch and CS:GO, and that seems like a pretty bold new sort of direction for you guys as a studio, moving away from the League of Legends universe. So can you tell us a little bit about that from a strategic perspective as well?
I think it kind of hits on the same pieces. It's like we created League and it's here for 10 and it's here forever, and now we're going to create this new IP that we hope does the exact same thing. So then there's multiple choice with what's coming out of Riot Games, and from a tac shooter perspective, League probably isn't the best IP to achieve that type of game experience. And so obviously strategically we spent a lot of time thinking about what makes sense and should it be a new IP, should it be League, etc. So I think it makes much more sense for the tac shooter we announced to be a new IP and show to players that we're invested in not just League but also other game experiences.
Awesome, thank you. One other just thing from me. On the facets of identity, like identity manifests in sort of different ways. It's internal culture is an aspect of it.
Yes.
External facing, sort of what you present to players in terms of your messaging and like what you represent with your IPs and stuff. That's another aspect of it. I just wondered if you had any sort of tips or thoughts for the devs in this room for how your identity needs to shift in these different ways, but also how it can stay consistent at the same time, because that must be quite tough to balance.
I think once you've decided what your studio identity is, it's about, okay, how can you live that in everything that you do when it comes to your communications, when it comes to messaging and the products that you make. So being really clear, like, what are those values? And they're not just words on a page, like, these are our studio values and this is our identity. And how do we live that in every single thing that we do? So the tone comes across correct, like for Riot Forge, we have our single-minded message, we have our tone of words, like we know how we want to talk about things, and we know that will help push and amplify our identity so that everything is consistent in what you do.